Happy Easter! Welcome back. If you're a member of Winchester Community United Methodist Church, this is how we're having church right now. If you're not a member of the church, but you're a friend or family member and you wanted to watch this, welcome. Right here we have the Fisher family Easter tree, so further evidence in our household that it is Easter. Hope you have an Easter tree. If not, maybe for next year you will. I love surprises. Whether it's a surprise phone call or card from a friend, perhaps someone I've not heard from in a long time, I love surprises. On my 30th birthday, a friend of mine decided to host a surprise birthday party for me. About 100 people showed up. Some traveled from out of state, out of town, and it was a great evening of celebrating. People took photos, and those photos are some that I cherish to this day because I love surprises. Well, today, Easter, is the anniversary of one of the biggest surprises in history. You see, the disciples were not expecting Jesus to be resurrected. Even though he prepared them for it, he told them about it. In fact, in Matthew chapter 16, verse 21, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Jesus tried to prepare them for the resurrection, but since they'd never experienced anything like that, they weren't expecting it. And so they were going through a weekend of grief. They had experienced an incredible loss. In fact, they were what my friend Joseph Narducci observed. They were in quarantine, much like we are in quarantine right now. They were hiding out. Jesus had been killed, crucified. They weren't sure what to do next because they had put their hope in him. And so they weren't expecting a resurrection. You and I wake up on Easter Sunday with a completely different attitude. For us, Easter is a celebration. Now, this year you may not be celebrating in some of the ways that you have in the past. There may not be any Easter egg hunts or other kinds of celebrations, family get-togethers, things like that. You certainly won't be at church on Easter Sunday, but you're still the church and you can still celebrate. And this is one of the ways we're doing it. Now, of course, Easter is not nearly as big a holiday in general as something like Christmas. Christmas has a lot more music. Christmas has a lot more decorations, a lot more celebrations. But scholar N.T. Wright observed that if you take out Christmas, you lose 4 chapters in the New Testament. If you take away the resurrection, you lose the entire New Testament, because Christianity is based on the fact of an historical resurrection of Jesus. The first story about the resurrection is recorded in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Paul wrote this letter to the Corinthians long before any of the 4 Gospels had been written. So this is the first written account of the resurrection. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, "For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day, according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas," that is Peter, "then to the 12. After that he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all of the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born." Paul describes some of the appearances of Jesus as a historical bodily resurrection. Now, it's true that to this day there are people who have a difficult time accepting the historical fact of the resurrection. The first person who had a difficult time accepting that was one of the apostles, Thomas. The others had seen Jesus in his resurrected form. They told Thomas about it, and he said, "Unless I put my finger into the hole where the nail was, or put my hand into the side where the spear was, I'm not going to believe it. And it was just about that time Jesus appeared to them again. And he held out his hands to Thomas. He showed him his side. He said, "There you are, Thomas." And Thomas fell to his knees. And he said, "I believe." And he called him my Lord and my God. And Jesus said to Thomas, "You believe because you see. Blessed are those who don't see and yet believe." You and I believe in the resurrection, the historical fact of the resurrection, on faith. When Paul was writing this letter to the church in Corinth, he was dealing with the fact that there were people who didn't believe in resurrection. And so he uses the resurrection of Jesus as an important facet of Christianity. But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? If there is no resurrection of the dead, not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. More than that, we are then found to be false witnesses about God. Paul was placing the resurrection of Jesus in its very essence, at the very heart of Christianity. Now, the resurrection is vast, it's very broad and sweeping in its impact on Christianity. But he went on to write to those Christians in Corinth, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." 11 years ago, a friend of mine was a pastor in Maui. Someone has to be. He had in his church 3 ladies who always attended together every Sunday. Their husbands were on the golf course. Well, for Easter, they had a special Saturday night service that weekend. And the 3 husbands said, "Well, it won't interfere with our golf game, so we're going to go with you." So the 3 husbands attended the Saturday night service with their 3 wives. In the midst of my friend's message at that special Easter service, one of those 3 men stood up and proclaimed very loudly, "I believe." And then the other 2 men followed suit. They stood as well and said, "I believe." You see, that Easter service on that Saturday night had a profound impact on those 3 men who had already seen the example of their wives and the faith that they each had. A couple of years after that, I contacted my friend and asked for an update on those 3 men. And he said all 3 stayed in the church, and they were actually part of a task force that was going to be starting a new Friday night service, because they said there are more people out there like us. They were calling it the Friday Night Golfers Outreach Service. The resurrection is an important historical fact that Jesus died for our sins. He was buried, and then he was raised to new life, so that you and I wake up on Easter Sunday morning celebrating because of that wonderful historical fact, what Francis Schaeffer always called the finished work of Christ, his death on the cross, the resurrection. As we so often say in church on Easter Sunday, "He is risen." And you respond with, "He is risen indeed." So he is risen. He is risen indeed. And as we always close our services at Winchester Community United Methodist Church, who are the beloved? And you say, we are. Go and be the beloved. God bless you, and happy Easter.